Bainbridge Asylum is looking to hire a new director. Applicants beware. Part 1. Part 1, Part 2, link Part 3, link Part 4, link final link. Patient Peter Ingram. Is this thing on? Right. So my name is Peter. Pete to my friends, but heck, I killed all my friends. So go ahead and call me Peter, hee hee. Look, I'll just tell you from the get-go that I am crazy. Certified insane. I mean, that's why I'm here. Right. They don't lock anyone away in Bainbridge Asylum unless they're batshit. No matter what some of the other patients would have you believe. Batshit and violent. Only 4 of my personalities are violent, really. But we all agree that I am right where I belong. I don't think of myself as a violent man. But I do get some enjoyment out of seeing how creative my alter egos are when they spill the blood of others. Feel free to judge me. It doesn't matter. Anyway, you're not here to listen to me prattle on about my personal issues. Right. You're here to learn about some of the strange goings-on at this noble old building that we, the condemned crazies, call home. I'm sure you'll be tempted to pass off a lot of what I say as nonsensical drivel, concocted in the disturbed halls of a broken mind. But listen here, I'm insane. But I'm not stupid. I'm not a liar. Nor have I ever suffered from hallucinations aside from when I was under the influence of illicit drugs. I won't pretend to understand everything that went on. But I know what I saw. I know the truth. No matter what the eggheads have to say about it. Right. So we aren't being allowed a ton of time for this interview. So I'll just share with you the scariest thing I've ever witnessed here. Or anywhere. For that matter. It happened on a day not too long ago during lunch. I was being allowed to join some of my fellow crazies in Cafeteria B2 of the B ward. Which is where we get to eat lunch when the eggheads are fairly certain we're not going to cause trouble. I get to eat there when I'm Peter because I never cause trouble. Like I said, I'm not a liar. Even when I'm not Peter. So after 15 years they've come to trust that I am who I say I am when asked. I only change after sleeping or after a seizure. So they know I won't suddenly decide to hurt someone or anything like that. On the whole, I'm probably one of easiest patients to care for. Except when I'm Henry. Things always get a lot more exciting and dangerous when I'm him. Anyway, that day at lunch, I decided to sit near Mason, a relative newcomer to the nut house. He had apparently worked in construction until the day he had killed and partially ate 2 of his co-workers on the job. Cannibalism isn't really my cuppa. But Mason is a nice enough guy when the voices in his head aren't urging him to eat the flesh of the chosen. He's pretty laid back on a normal day. So it's easy to see when he's worked up and fighting his demons. Even Henry knows to keep his distance then. But this day, he was fine. So I sat down to his left, being careful to leave 2 empty seats between us. You always have to leave 2 seats open on either side of him in case his dead co-workers are in attendance. Hey, Mason, I said. I heard you had a visitor this morning. Peter, he asked, eyeing me cautiously. The one and only, I answered, chuckling lightly to let him know there was no danger here. Right, he said, turning his attention back to the food on his plate. Yeah. The wife came by with my kid. He chewed on a baby carrot in silence for a moment. And then sighed. She still won't talk to me or even look in my direction. You know. My boy, he tries to be all cheerful like. But I can tell he isn't comfortable with the way me and his mom are. I can still see his love for me shining in his little eyes. But there's also a lot of sadness there. I expect it won't do him much good to keep seeing me in this place. But what can I do? Man. They won't ever let me go back home. I grunted in agreement, swallowing a mouthful of mashed potatoes. Well, at least he doesn't have to stay here. Anyway. Not like that kid Galloway. Thank God for small favors. He laughed. Do you know that Galloway kid's father still tries to get them to allow him a one-on-one visit with his son? My boy ever tried to kill me like what Galloway did to his dad. They wouldn't have to worry about his sorry but here. He'd be sitting comfortably at the bottom of a 6-foot concrete grave. Ain't it the truth? I smiled, chugging down half the milk in my cup. Honestly, I'm not sure I share Mason's sentiment about Galloway. If I'd ever had a son, I might be proud to have one who accomplished what that boy had. Even if I had to become one of his victims. I can only imagine the fun I might have had with a little pup to raise. Peter. Mason gasped suddenly, staring at a spot above and behind me. He stammered, his left eye starting to twitch. Do you see that thing? It's not one of mine. I don't know. I don't usually like to involve myself in other wackos' psychological misfires. But something about the look in his eyes made me think it would be wise to take a look for myself. There was a very distinct feeling of something dangerous lurking behind me that made me instinctively want to protect my spine. Or maybe it wasn't a feeling so much as the naked terror written on Mason's face that got me. I quickly whipped my head around to see what was going on, and yelped in shock at the vision before me. Again. I freely admit that I am insane, and I know that you'll be disinclined to fully believe my account of this incident. But I know what I saw. I know that Mason and I witnessed the same thing, with no possible explanation for that except for us actually having seen it with our own eyes. This was no hallucination. And, as far as I know, hallucinations don't typically kill people, not directly. Anyway, just, please, bear with me and listen to my whole story before you shut off the recorder and move on to the next crazy. You don't have to believe me, but just listen. What I saw, I kid you not, was a little old granny, plastered most of the way up the wall behind our table. Like, seriously. The face was that of the stereotypical old white grandma, with friendly wrinkles and laugh lines, sparkling blue eyes, and a benevolent smile on her small lips. Her long, silver hair was done up in a messy bun atop her head, and her earlobes were adorned with small pearl earrings. The reading glasses resting across the bridge of her nose added a touch of charming intelligence. It was the kind of face that automatically brought to mind images of freshly baked chocolate chip cookies and homemade lemonade. Story time by the fireplace. Magical purses and peppermint candies. I might well have been pleasantly surprised if it hadn't been for the rest of her. The granny wore no clothes. From her neck down, she was long and fleshy, almost like a slug with her absence of limbs. Her skin looked like the exact color and texture of a thawed, store-bought, plucked chicken. The edges of her skin, where it connected with the wall, were an almost lavender shade of purple, and they flapped and undulated lightly as though disturbed by a breeze. When she moved a little closer to us, her motion was more snake-like than sluggish in its quickness and side-to-side action. I jerked back in surprise and knocked over my cup of milk, but never let my eyes leave the horror on the wall. I felt Mason's strong hands grip my shoulders and pull me closer to him. Dead co-workers be damned. Hey, what's the problem over here? Came the booming voice of Mr. Manny, one of the security guards from our ward. He stepped in front of us with his hands hovering menacingly over both his club and his taser. I couldn't fathom how he hadn't seen the thing on the wall on his way over to us, but I tried my best to draw his attention to the problem by wildly gesticulating in its direction. Mason only tightened his fearful grip on me as we both wordlessly trembled. Mr. Manny only grunted in frustration and reached for his walkie-talkie, presumably to call for some assistance in getting us out of the cafeteria before we could cause a disturbance. The granny never gave him a chance. Quickly slithering down closer to the guard, the creature shot two thick, long tendrils out of her body and wrapped them around his neck. Mr. Manny's arms shot down to his sides and he went completely rigid as the granny turned him to face her and pulled him in close. He looked completely terrified, and I'm sure he would have screamed his head off if he had been allowed to make a sound. As it was, It appeared that the awful monstrosity had him under some kind of paralysis with her hold. And all he could do was stare helplessly and wet his pants. The granny gazed at him lovingly as would a grandmother doting on her beloved grandchild, cooing softly as the ends of her tendrils stroked his cheeks. The end of that tender moment finally came when two smaller appendages with long, rudimentary fingers emerged from under the monster's chin. The fingers held long, sharp knitting needles that looked to be made of the same substance as her body. And I couldn't help but think that they looked fitting for a nightmare grandma. The way she popped those knitting needles into Mr. Manny's eyes, however, seemed unbecoming of any grandmother outside of hell. It was only after that horrid act that Mr. Manny was finally able to let out a piercing, agonized scream. Out of my mind with terror, I wildly looked around the room, hoping to see other guards running over to deal with the grotesque, elderly abomination on the wall. Unbelievably, no one else in the room seemed to notice anything out the ordinary. Not the other patients. Not the guards. Not the orderlies or other staff present in the cafeteria. Mason and I were the only unfortunate witnesses of this ghoulish event. It was as if we had somehow been moved just out of reach of the mundane world for a personal show of insanity beyond comprehension. A painful tightening of Mason's grip on my shoulders brought my attention back to that which I wish I could unsee. I don't know how to properly explain what I saw next. Even now, I find it difficult to wrap my mind around what the granny creature did to Mr. Manny. The best way I can describe it is to say that she unraveled him. He came apart like a ball of yarn as she worked him over and used his unraveled flesh to knit a hooded covering for her body. She used some of his bones for accents in her bloody garment, fashioning them into buttons and flower-like patterns. She let his internal organs and uniform fall to the floor in an unused pile of gore. Afterwards, the monster donned her cloak, retracted her appendages, and looked approvingly at her handiwork. Then, she kindly smiled at us and slithered her way back up the wall and into an open vent in the ceiling. Only after Mason let go of his hold on me to collapse onto the floor in blessed unconsciousness did I finally manage a proper scream of my own. Almost like some spell had been broken when the creature had left the room. The entire cafeteria suddenly became aware of the chaos happening in our section. The bloody remains that used to be Mr. Manny caused everyone to fly into a panic, with some of the other crazies becoming violent at the sight of the carnage. I just sat screaming through it all, until a seizure stole me away and Patricia took my place. From what I hear, she had found a good place to hide until things settled down and the patients were taken out of there. So, anyway, the story that everyone is being fed about the incident is that an unnamed psycho in the ward managed to sneak into the cafeteria and kill the guard who discovered him. No explanation of how this random sicko reduced Mr. Manny to such a state without being noticed by the rest of the people in the room. Manny and my accounts are discredited because we're insane. Of course. And who would believe it even if we weren't? I don't know. Maybe I'm just crazier than I thought and none of what I saw was real. But then, why did the director of Bainbridge suddenly decide to resign after that? What did he see on the security footage that day? Believe me, that man has seen a lot of messed up stuff in all his years of working here. What was it that finally put him over the edge? Man, I just don't know anymore. Anyway, that's all I've got for you. If you ever want to know about the other weird things I've seen in this place, you know where to find me. I just wish that wasn't here anymore. In Bainbridge. I've been in this place a long time. But now things just don't feel much like home anymore. I don't really feel safe here anymore. You know. Well, good luck to whomever you peg to be the next director of this crazy farm. He's going to need it. That was a shocker. Granny did need clothes. Be glad it wasn't you and Mason. Though she's still crawling around somewhere. Be alert.